Good evening, council, staff, members of the public. May I have a mover and seconder to call the meeting to order, please? I have councillors Garwood and Alexander that the special meeting of September 11th, 2024 come to order at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Councillor, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? And not seeing any, may I have a mover and seconder to call the public meeting to order, please? I have councillors Fisher and Moore that the public meeting of council held under section 34 of the Planning Act for applications SU 2024 OP 2024-004 and ZB 2024-013-139 Queen Street West, SU 2020-002 and ZB 2020-017 of 132 Doran Road, ZB 2024-014 of 2842 Wilson Drive, ZB 2024-015 of 1822 Sunnydale Road, and OP 2024-005 and ZB 2024-016 short-term rental accommodations be called to order at 6:32 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Welcome to this public meeting of Springwater Township Council held in compliance with Section 34 of the Planning Act to give the public an opportunity to express their views in regard to the proposed amendment to the Township of Springwater zoning bylaw as amended. The first part of the meeting is to present the amendment. Following, the public will be given an opportunity to make oral submissions through Zoom application or in person. Any person wishing to make an oral submission is to have notified the township prior to 8:30 a.m. this morning and be added to the commenters list. If a person or public body who files an appeal of a decision of the Township of Springwater in respect of a zoning bylaw amendment does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or in writing submissions to the Township of Springwater before the proposed zoning bylaw amendment has passed, the Ontario Land Tribunal may dismiss all or part of the appeal. All comments and questions should be addressed through the chair. Oral submissions will be included in the meeting minutes and form part of the public record, including the name and address of the speaker as information collected under the Municipal Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act. The minutes of the meeting will be posted to the township website. Our first this evening is SU 2024-002, OP 2024-004, and ZB 2024-013, San Diego Home, 139 Queen Street West. I will now call upon the clerk to confirm notice of this meeting and the dates which notice has been given.
Notice of this public meeting was mailed on the 22nd day of August, 2024 to the owner of the subject lands and to the assessed owners of 43 properties in the Township of Springwater within 240 meters of the area to which the proposed amendment would apply, and to all persons and public bodies as prescribed under the Planning Act and its regulations. Notice was posted at the assessed property to which the proposed amendment applies at a location visible from Queen Street West. Notice was also posted on the township's website.
Has the planning department received any correspondence in response to the notice of public meeting?
Correspondence was received from Nation Huron-Wendat in an email dated June 19, 2024, from Canada Post in a letter dated June 19, 2024, from the Building Services Department in a letter dated June 20th, 2024, from Bell Canada in an email dated June 23rd, 2024, Springwater Fire and Emergency Services in an email dated June 25th, 24, Enbridge Gas in an email dated June 25th, 2024, the City of Barrie Environmental Risk Management and Compliance in a memo dated July 3rd, 2024, Simcoe County District School Board in a letter dated July 10, 2024, County of Simcoe Planning Department in a letter dated July 1st, 2024, Simcoe Muskoka Catholic District School Board in an email dated July 16, 24, Hydro One in an email dated July 16, 24, Ainley Group in a letter dated August 27, 2024, Claire Bateman Zerny in an email dated August 28, 2024, Christopher Bateman in an email dated September 2nd, 2024, additional comments from the County of Simcoe Planning Department in an email dated September 6, 24, Margaret and John Potts in a letter dated September 7, 24, and the City of Barrie Risk Management in a memo dated September 11th, 24. And all of the correspondence can be found attached to this evening's agenda.
Thank you. I will now call upon Agent Christine Loft to outline the purpose and effect of the subdivision application, official plan amendment, and zoning bylaw amendment. And I would just ask that you pull the microphones as close to you as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Christine Loft from Loft Planning, and I am representing San Diego Homes for this file. I apologize, I'm getting over a cold and my voice is not quite back. We do have representatives from San Diego Homes here with us tonight, Sandra Rosardo, as well as others, and Susanna Nilsson from Burnside Engineering, who has been completing the engineering work. So I will not reiterate the file numbers. The property is 139 Queen Street West. Next slide, please. So the lands are municipally known as 139 Queen Street West. The lands are located in Elmvale. The surrounding land uses are as follows. To the north is single detached residential uses along Queen Street West, as well as Elmvale Storage. To the west is CarQuest Auto Parts, residential uses, Robinson Park, Elmvale Village, and Simcoe Paramedic Services. To the south is other lands owned by the applicant, which I'll speak to momentarily, and those lands are currently under cultivation. To the east is the self-serve car wash, residential uses, and commercial uses, fresh cut fries, and the Elmvale Heritage Park. So the area is a mix of residential and commercial uses along Queen Street, as well as residential development to the west. Next slide. The lands are located on the south side of Queen Street, south of Copeland Road and east of the Elmvale Village residential development. The subject lands have a lot area of 7.09 hectares and lot frontage of 20.12 meters onto Queen Street. The lands do currently have a draft approval. It's file 43T93018. The subdivision is for 71 units. This actually is an old ministry approval dated 1999, and it's one of those approvals that does not have an expiry date on it. So we had early discussions with the municipality on a red line revision, but based on the original draft plan, it seemed in order to meet official plan policies, it would be the municipality asked that rather than a red line revision that we apply for a new subdivision, go completely through the process as a new application. So the existing draft approval still is in place, and we would withdraw that draft approval after we receive draft approval on the submission before you tonight. So the lands are currently vacant, and the owner does own adjacent lands to the east and to the south, which I'll show you momentarily. Next slide. So before you tonight are 3 applications: a draft plan of subdivision for 55 single detached residential units, 11 blocks totaling 60 street townhouses, and 4 blocks for road allowances. It also includes 5 blocks for future development, as well as a stormwater management block. And it includes 1 internal road. The official plan proposal is to redesignate the lands from urban residential and general commercial to an urban residential exception designation with site-specific provisions to exempt the development from section 9.2.6.2 of the official plan. The zoning bylaw amendment proposes to rezone the lands to the open space exception zone, the residential 1 exception zone, and a residential 3 exception zone. There are two R1 exception zones, and I'll speak to those momentarily, and an open space zone, which represents the stormwater management block. Next slide. So following pre-consultation, we did receive comments as well as the list of technical reports required. I will not go through them, but the list on the slide are the documents that were submitted as part of a complete submission. Next slide. So this is the draft plan before you. Morrow Group prepared the draft plan. It obviously identifies the subject lands on the left-hand side of the screen. The applicant does own adjacent lands, which are the blocks to the south of the draft plan location, as well as the block to the southeast. The street D identified as Allenwood will connect to the west into the existing Allenwood Street within the Ellenvale Village. And that road stub does already exist within the development to the west. And so these two developments will ultimately connect. Main access is at the north end of the development and accesses to Queen Street. And there is a connection stub you can see within the draft approval that will connect east into future development lands. So the draft plan identifies Street A, B, C, and D, a number of single residential blocks, which I have highlighted on another slide so you can see those momentarily. The stormwater management block is located in the northeast corner. The townhome blocks are blocks 56 through 66. And then there is a small portion of future development lands that will be connected to a future development block. Next slide. So this is the so this is the current policy within the official plans. The lands are designated urban residential and general commercial. You can see the area of general commercial is just right along Queen Street. So it's really just the proposed road coming into the development has a general commercial on it. And so the proposed development would permit singles and towns. And through pre-consultation, it has been determined that an official plan amendment is required. With regard to the existing zoning, the lands are currently zoned R1 45, R1 46, and R1 47 with a hold provision. And so those zones actually implement the draft approval, which is in place today, that we ultimately will withdraw once we're moving forward with the proposed draft plan approval. Next slide. So this is the proposed official plan word language as well as the Schedule A. So the proposed OPA language includes C policy 9.2, and we'll have the exception number added in, may be permitted to develop with a 115 unit draft plan of subdivision with a mix of residential units, including singles and townhouses, and is not subject to policy section 9.2.6.2 in its entirety. And a second part of the exception, which is to permit a density of 16.2 units per hectare, being 27.3 units per net hectare. Next slide. And this is the schedule, the proposed language for the zoning bylaw amendment, as well as the Schedule A. So the bylaw is to rezone the subject lands from the existing R1 holding provision, residential R1 45 and R1 46, and R1 47, as well as an environmental protection zone, to new zones, which would include an open space zone, which represents the stormwater management pond, a residential 1 exception, exception 2, as well as an exception 3, and then a residential 3 exception as well, with site-specific modifications to the lot standards and additional permitted uses within the open space zone for the stormwater use. Next slide. And so I just wanted to go through each of the zones. We are proposing three zones within the development for the residential portion. So I have highlighted them in colors. So with regard to the yellow area, actually, I'll just start by saying that all of the singles, which are the blue and the yellow colors on the screen today, are on all of the external boundaries of the property. So any adjacent land, specifically to the west, would be singles abutting the neighborhood to the west. And then on the south side and the east side, those would also be singles, which ultimately back onto existing properties to the northeast, and then San Diego Homes future development lands to the southeast. So the yellow represents the singles that would have a lot frontage of 10.8 meters frontage and a minimum lot area of 345 square meters. The lots do range, these are the minimums, and the lots do range in terms of end lots, and there is some variety depending on, I think you can see it primarily in the in the blue area, the singles to the left, where the depths vary a little. So in some of those more shallower lots, then the lot area, the lot is a little wider. And so you're getting various lot areas. So overall, a minimum of 345 square meters. The blue represents the singles with 13.7 meter frontages and a minimum lot area of 467 meters. Again, those are minimums. And with regard to each of the zones, the zone provisions are proposed to implement what we would consider to be fairly standard provisions that we see in other municipal zoning bylaws. We have also allowed for accessory dwelling units to be permitted within these zones. And the brighter yellow that you'll see just at the bottom at the south end of the property, those are lots that you can see only the front portion of the lots are within this draft approval. And so those lots would have a holding provision on them and would not be developable until such time as a future phase to the south moves forward. And next slide. And these lots represent the townhome lots, and the green is the stormwater management pond. So with regard to the orange color, so basically all of the central blocks are the townhouse units. These units have a minimum lot frontage of 6.1 meters and a minimum lot area of 195 square meters. Again, these are minimums. Each of the end units are wider, and several of the lots do have larger lot areas, but in general, those are the minimums and what the exceptions are being asked for. The towns, based on the lot coverage we're proposing, the towns could be about 1,200 square feet. And we do not have any architecturals yet. And so those calculations are based on lot coverage. But we would anticipate that we would get to that lot coverage on the lots while still meeting the setbacks that we have proposed. And next slide. And so with respect to future applications, we will have a future part lot control exemption request for the townhomes. And in the future, we would require a lift of hold application for those development lots along the south portion that are partially within a future phase. And there was one slide that was missing, and I'm just wondering if it would be. It was my slide 7. Okay. That's fine. It was just another color drawing which depicted sort of everything all together. So I think I've indicated everything that I wanted to. I will just say that the development is a total of 115 units with a density of 16.2 units per gross hectare and 27.3 of net hectare, which would be the calculation that we would generally use within the policy documents. And those are my comments, and we're here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I will now call upon the moderator to provide the number of people who have registered to ask questions or make comments regarding this application.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Coughlin. There have been 3 members of the public who have registered to make oral submission for this application. First, we have Claire Bateman-Jerny. If you would like to come to the stand and state your address for the record.
Welcome. So let's have you state your name and your address for the record, and then you can begin.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Claire Bateman-Zerny. I'm from 19 Armadale Avenue in Toronto, and my husband here is with me, Chester. And today I am objecting to this plan, and I'll just start again from reading from this. My name is Claire Bateman-Zerny, and I'm opposing this plan for a section of 139 Queen Street West by Loft Planning on behalf of Diego Rezerdo, San Diego Homes. If this bylaw is passed as shown on the application, It will permanently landlock 109 Queen Street West, which abuts 139 Queen Street West. This will cause our land to have no value. That's my brother Christopher, who will be speaking later. I do not see our road, which is part of a development agreement prepared by the former lawyer for the Village of Elmvale, Guy P. DiTomaso, on August the 13th, 1991, and passed by council on August 26th, 1991. I am the executrix for my mother, Margaret Mary Bateman, Rita, and 109 Queen Street West is held in her name. 109 Queen Street abuts 139 Queen Street West. The plan loft planning are using in the application is from the 70s, and the official plan for the Township of Springwater is not up to date. The latest plan was for Wye River Estates for 71 lots that were surveyed and pinned property identification number by Rudy Mack, Angela Rudy. Water and sewer was also assigned. Since 1991, the Village of Elmvale and the Township of Springwater has accepted multiple plans for this section of 139 Queen Street West, ignoring the development agreement prepared by the former lawyer for the Village of Elmvale, Guy P. DiTomaso. In 1991, the Village of Elmvale needed to expand its pump house and also required a road to access this pump house. Guy P. DiTomaso, the former lawyer, prepared an agreement between Marilyn Whitten, Kosher Properties, who's a lawyer, Jerome Stanley, and the Village of Elmvale. Marilyn Whitten and Mary Margaret Whitten conveyed land with the expectation of a road to be built to landlock 109 Queen Street West. Additional land from this notice of agreement is registered under lands titles 211926, 911119. Guy P. DiTomaso realized he made an error and land was omitted. He then went to the Midland Courthouse on October 6, 1991, and swore that this land from the agreement dated August 13, 1991, and passed on August 26, 1991, was missing. He put it into a bylaw 91-24 dated November 7th, 1991. It is registered under Registry Office 0116894491117. I recently donated the 9-page bylaw, including a Schedule A that was missing from the County of Simcoe archives. This Schedule A included a survey by D.S. Plainview and Associates for a proposed road. This road has never been built to 109 Queen Street West. The Village of Elmvale and the Township of Springwater have used this land conveyed by Mary Margaret Whitten and Marilyn Whitten since 1991. And Jim McIntosh, lawyer for Barriston Law, the Township of Springwater's lawyer, is in the process of nullifying part of this conveyed land for a road easement to assist a resident on Queen Street West to give them the required lot coverage on a minor variance application for their oversized garage and workshop. By nullifying this road, I believe they are changing the agreement prepared by Guy P. DiTomaso. I notice this road has now been paved with asphalt and new sod has been laid around the area. A plan for 71 subdivision for Wye River Estates was given to me by Angela Rudy at the Township of Springwater meeting in 2007. I was there with Andrew Fife, Director of Planning, along with other members of the Township of Springwater to ask where my road was on these plans. Angela Rudy said she did not know about the road. A block 75 was provided. Wye River Estates went bankrupt in 2008. I was told at this meeting 35 homes could be built on 109 Queen Street West. 115 housing units are planned by loft planning, which is an additional 44 units that will need sewer and water. The developer that could potentially purchase my land will also need sewer and water for their plans. This will impact the price we can receive for 109 Queen Street West if sewer and water is not available. I retained lawyer Eric Finn in 2007 after the meeting with the Township of Springwater and Angela Rudy Mack. Eric Finn was with the law firm Berger Rowe and sent a letter on July 26, 2007 to 1685098 Ontario Inc. /Y River Estates and Mrs. Winan Grant, Chief Administrative Officer for the Township of Springwater. A follow-up letter was sent on August the 14th, 2007, stating they were in default of the agreement. Andrew Fife, Director of Planning, responded and said the Township of Springwater is aware of the agreement dated August 13th, 1991, and to date, the development has not progressed to the point where a subdivision agreement has been entered into. The subdivision has not been registered and the associated road allowances have not been conveyed to the municipality, and he told me I had the option to build the road myself. I then received an email from Eric Finn, who told me to hire a planner and, in my opinion, discouraged me from pursuing the steps necessary to sever the land for the road. Eric Finn said I would get my road when Y River Estates developed their land. Y River Estates went bankrupt and Diego Rosero San Diego Homes purchased 139 Queen Street West under power of sale. The property consists of 85 acres purchased from the mortgage holders, who were Jerome Stanley, lawyer / Kosher Properties, and J.T. Tucker Holdings, Inc. et al. This holding company was formed by Jerome Stanley for 10 members of a syndicate who each contributed $100,000. Berger Rowe, I later found out, was the Township of Springwater's lawyers. Berger Rowe merged with Barriston Law, and Eric Finn worked for them until his retirement. Tonight, I am asking the Township of Springwater to abandon this application by loft planning on behalf of Diego Rosero San Diego Homes, and I am asking Diego Rosero to grant me the right-of-way so I may sever the land required for the road shown under the agreement. I am also asking the Township of Springwater to fulfill their obligation and assist me with planning for this road to landlocked 109 Queen Street West, Altonville. Thank you.
Thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
comments. I will now turn to our moderator for thank you for that. Our second speaker.
Yes, I'm just promoting Mr. Bateman to a panelist in order to speak.
Mr. Bateman, can you hear us okay? Mr. Bateman, you appear to be muted.
I'm unmuted. Did you not hear what I said?
We can hear you now. No, we missed the first part of your presentation.
Okay. What I was saying was that there is a lot of existing documentation that shows what a road was agreed to be provided to 109 Queen Street West. By not recognizing these past agreements, your proposal for future developments are in violation of the agreements and will effectively landlock the property. And I trust that the township will recognize that these agreements are binding.
Mr. Bateman, if I can have you again state your name and address for the record as well, please.
My name is Christopher Bateman. I'm at 140 Carlton Street in Toronto.
Thank you, Mr. Bateman. I will now look to our moderator for our third.
Yes, we have Mr. and Mrs. Margaret and John Potts, who are in person, and they may come to the stand, and please state your address and names for the record.
please come forward. Yeah, Mr. Potts, I'm just going to need your name and your address to begin.
My name is John Potts, and my wife Margaret live at 14 Amelia Street in Elmvale. May I proceed?
Please.
As I said, Margaret and John Potts live at 14 Amelia Street in Elmvale, one of a number of properties adjacent to the Wye River as it flows from Highway 92, County Road 92, to Bishop's Park and beyond. When we moved to the property in 1973, concern about river flooding was not an issue, and long-term residents on the street spoke of the flooding caused by Hurricane Hazel in 1954 as a once-in-lifetime event. In the years since 73, the river would vary in depth from very low level in summertime, ankle deep for children to paddle to the west side of the river, to halfway up the bank during the spring snow melt. When a new subdivision southwest of Highway 92, in the area where the EMS building is situated, was proposed some years ago, I attended an information public meeting at Elmvale Community Hall and raised a concern that increased runoff from the new housing development would drain into the Wye River, potentially causing flooding to properties along Amelia Street. Engineers for the development said that a holding pond would contain runoff, allowing water to drain into the river in a controlled manner. Only in extreme rainfall would the pond overflow onto the road and eventually into the river. Nevertheless, in recent years, river levels along Amelia Street have risen steadily. On one occasion, Simcoe Road 92 was flooded and briefly closed at the Wye River Bridge. Earlier this year, 2024, there was considerable flooding of the Wye River, causing basement flooding on both sides of Amelia Street and onto Lawn Street, one street east of Amelia Street. The proposal to build 115 residential units on land so close to the Wye River where it flows behind properties on Amelia and Lawn Streets, combined with the already underway phase 2 of residential construction in the area near the EMS building, raises concerns that additional stormwater runoff will substantially increase the probability of river flooding to properties on Amelia and Lawn Streets. We'd like to ask the developers how they propose to address the potential flooding. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments this evening.
Thank you.
At this time, I will turn to members that are here this evening. If there's any additional comments or questions, please come forward. And this time I will then turn to council for any comments or questions on. Councillor Garwood. Sorry, your mic. Thank you.
Sorry. Through you, Mayor Coughlin, to Director Heron or Senior Planner Russell, in regards to the item that Mr. Potts had just referenced in regards to potential flooding, understanding that residents on Amelia Street and in the immediate area over the past few years have suffered many various floods and storms during some torrential rainfall. Understanding I spoke to you earlier on today about this, but could you maybe just speak to the process in regards to ensuring moving forward that appropriate studies will be completed, whether it be through the MVCA or the developer themselves, and what that looks like moving forward, just so the residents can be assured?
Director Heron.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. The normal process for reviewing plans of subdivision involves not just the lot creation and where the parks and roads and houses will go and what types of houses, but there's a phenomenal amount of engineering that would be behind the design. Stormwater management is one of those key aspects that the engineers would be looking at and designing too. The key point to know about this and for the public to understand is that every new development has to outlet water to neighboring properties or outlets at the same rate that it does today before it's developed. So that's where the stormwater management ponds come into play to retain the water. They do two things. They both address the quality of the water, so they tend to clean the water so that you're not getting sediment and chemicals washing downstream, as can happen, and also the quantity of the water as well. So I suspect that with Mr. Potts's comment, the engineers were likely being honest in terms of the design based on his comment to the previous application. We are aware that there have been some additional or more intense climate events as of late. And in fact, I think it was about 5 years ago, it was an incredibly wet season, and everywhere in this area, there was a lot more water in the ground just because there was more water in the environment falling on. And so the capacity of the area to absorb it was a little bit delayed. So there was more groundwater throughout the course of the summer. I'm aware of this because of my previous employ. There were a lot of basements flooded at that time as well. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to allow, with your permission, Manager Russell to speak to it because there were additional requirements that were provided through the pre-consultation related to flooding and studies for flooding.
Thank you. Manager Russell?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Council. That's correct, and thank you, Director Heron. There were floodplain assessments that were required as part of this application. And to speak to the process, we are still very early on in this process from a technical review perspective. This public meeting right now represents a very early first sort of crack for the residents to voice any opinions or concerns related to flooding or stormwater leaving this site. We will be looking at that as part of the overall stormwater management design and potential for flooding through both our township engineers as well as the NVCA engineers. And I don't want to get too technical tonight for tonight's purpose, but as we are aware of this, we will be looking at these two issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher?
Through you to, I guess, the representative for the developer. You'd mentioned that they are accessory dwelling capable. I'm wondering, of the 115 units, how many are estimated to be accessory dwelling capable? And would those be in detached homes or townhomes? And I'll have a follow-on.
Thank you through the chair to the councillor. So the accessory units would could be in any of the units that a purchaser wished to move forward with. They could purchase that accessory unit as part of the purchase of the home, and San Diego Homes would include that within the package, or the units could be, of course, constructed after purchase. So we have we don't have any way of knowing exactly the number of units in the future, but there would be a possibility there for the accessory units to be established.
You following?
So I'm to take that then that these would be separate from the actual dwelling. It wouldn't be necessarily inside of the dwelling like a basement apartment.
The proposal, the accessory units are proposed to be in the unit. Yes.
So I guess what I'm thinking then is, of 115 units, theoretically, the majority, should the purchasers want it, have additional dwellings. I'm just concerned that there would be increased quite a bit more traffic flow and need for parking. I wonder if that's been accounted for. It seems like a variable that we don't really know, right? It's left up to the purchaser ultimately.
Through the
Thank
chair. Thank you. Yes, I mean, I certainly guess would be interested from staff to know what the uptake in this community is. My experience is that the uptake isn't all that high just yet within most municipalities, but I think it certainly would be, the uptake of a purchaser to prepare or to construct the accessory unit in the future. And so it is difficult certainly to have a number at the outset.
Any further questions, Council? Councillor Garwood?
Through you, Mayor Coughlin. Just speaking in regards to the placement of the stormwater pond, understanding currently right now it is not abutting, or at least proposed to not be abutting the rail trail there. Understanding the rail trail is a favorite of the community, and I know we've had other developments that have come forward to this table on the other side of that trail that this development would eventually connect into should they proceed. So can you just speak to the placement of that pond, and for instance, why it wouldn't necessarily abut the trail, for instance, and keep it more of a natural landscape than abut houses and the blue, I think it's the second last slide in your presentation there, right along the rail trail.
Ms. Loft?
Thank you, through the chair. I don't know, Susanna, do you want to speak to the general location? I'll just ask the engineer to speak to that. Is it on?
Thank you.
Through your worship to the councillor, the location of the stormwater management pond is generally set closest to the outlet. So wherever we can get it closest to the ultimate outlet. So that is generally on that side of the road. If it was abutting the rail trail, the pipes or in the overland flow, if there was a large storm, would have to go over the road. And that is generally not something that we want to see in engineering.
Thank you for that. Anything further on this, Council? Not seeing any. Thank you to all who participated in the public meeting with respect to the proposed subdivision application, official plan amendment, and zoning bylaw amendment, and for showing an interest in this matter. We will now move on to SU 2020-002 and ZB 2020-017, 132 Doran Road. I will now call upon the clerk to confirm notice of this meeting and the dates to which notice has been given.
Notice of this public meeting was mailed on the 22nd day of August 2024 to the owner of the subject lands and to the assessed owners of 17 properties in the township of Springwater within 240 meters of the area to which the proposed amendment would apply, and to all persons and public bodies as prescribed under the Planning Act and its regulations. Notice was posted at the assessed property to which the proposed amendment applies at a location visible from Doran Road. Notice was also posted on the township's website.
Has the planning department received any correspondence in response to the notice?
Correspondence was received from Canada Post in a letter dated July 21, 2024, from Bell Canada in a letter dated July 22nd, 2024, Enbridge Gas in a letter dated July 24th, 2024, Parks, Recreation and Facilities Department in an email dated July 24, 2024, County of Simcoe Planning Department in a letter dated August 9, 2024, Simcoe County District School Board in a letter dated August 13th, 2024, Hydro One Networks in an email dated August 28th, 2024, Megan Basil of 3759 Baseline Road in an email dated September 10, 24, Ron Palmer of the Planning Partnership in a letter dated September 10, 24, Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority in an email dated September 10, 24, and the City of Barrie Risk Management in a memo dated September 11, 24, and all correspondence can be found attached to this evening's agenda.
Thank you. I will now call upon the agent to provide the purpose and effect of the subdivision application and zoning bylaw amendment.
Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Great, thanks. Good evening. My name is Corey Chisholm. I'm a registered professional planner and partner with MHBC Planning in our Barrie office. And I'm here before you this evening on behalf of the ownership group for the proposed development, Silver Paradise Midhurst Incorporated. Before I begin, I'd like to thank members of the public who are in attendance this evening, council, and also township staff's efforts to date on this application. The purpose of the public meeting this evening is for two applications that are before the township, a zoning bylaw amendment and a corresponding draft plan of subdivision application. And I'll take council and members of the public through that through my presentation, and then similar to the presentation before, happy to answer any questions at the end. Next slide, please. So just to start, this slide identifies an aerial image of the subject lands outlined in red. They do have frontage on Doran Road, and this aerial is a little dated, but you can see the lands immediately to the north. That's the Midhurst Heights subdivision. And at the time this was taken, some of those pre-servicing works had begun. You can see some of those roadways, which many of them are now paved, but those were starting to be cleared. Next slide, please. So just a bit of history on the proposed development. What we made recently on behalf of the new ownership group was technically a second submission of the original application. The first submission was made back in 2020. It did not proceed to a public meeting, so that this is the first time council and the public are seeing it in this forum. But that first submission was a different development concept. It was made by a previous ownership group and a previous consultant team. You can see here there's a variety of single, semi, townhouse, and getting into apartment style forms of development, as well as some mixed use and commercial blocks. Before we proceed to the next slide, which shows the revised proposed development, I do just want to highlight a few key differences from the first development concept. The first is the location of Street A. On this concept, you can see it's the diagonal road that's coming out to Doran. One of the comments that was received on this first submission was in regards to that road alignment. So where we started with this is we tried to build off the comments that were received on this previous application, and work collaboratively with both the development to the north and township staff to make some improvements to address some of the comments received previously. So when we jump to the next slide, we'll see a difference in that road pattern. There's the area to the west of the plan here. It shows a Street J that comes off Gill Road. There were some concerns at the time due to both environmental constraints and some archaeological constraints and topography with development in that kind of southwest corner of the site. So when we do move forward, you'll see this portion has been removed from the application. So those lands may come forward in the future, but they will require additional technical studies to see if there is development potential on those lands. And finally, on this plan, where you can see Street H kind of at the bottom central part of the plan, at the time it was a larger land holding. Since that time, the previous owner did actually sever a rectangular piece, largely where it says Street H and south of that. So that was before Committee of Adjustment, I believe last year it was severed. So our client acquired the lands without that piece. So we'll see that when we move to the next slide, and the land area is slightly different. So if we can move to the next slide. So this is the revised plan. As mentioned, that area of the west side has been removed from this draft plan application. That rectangular piece along the south was previously severed off. So it's not part of this application, but we do need to provide road connections to ensure that it can develop comprehensively in the future. And we can see we've straightened out the road pattern. So we've tried to make it more of an efficient grid style road pattern and eliminate a lot of the inefficient kind of diagonal lots that were along that curved road in the past. The road does come straight down Street A from the Midhurst Heights down to Doran. And there has been collaboration with Geranium, which owns the development lands immediately south of this site. So there has been collaboration between the three landowners through the Midhurst Landowners Group on that alignment. We have received some preliminary comments from township staff with some concerns with where that connects to Doran. So that's something that our team's going to need to review in more detail as we move forward. And we may need to make some adjustments to the plan depending on that outcome. Just to go over the rest of the plan, similar to the previous plan, there is a mix of product type. So there is 167 single detached dwellings. Those are three sizes, 9.15 meters, 10.7 meters, and 12.2 meters. So the smallest of those would be single car garage, small singles, and the larger two sizes would be double car garage, single detached homes. There's 97 traditional townhomes, and in purple, there's 94 back-to-back townhomes. That's a newer product type we're starting to see. And really, we have some graphics in a future slide, and I'll go through that in a bit more detail at that time. The block in red along the south, Doran, in the township's official plan, there's a need for some commercial component there. So it is a mixed use block. And again, in a future slide, I'll go through what that may look like in the future. We've also located two park blocks. There's a larger park more central and a smaller parkette in the southeast corner of the site. Next slide, please. So with all applications of this type, there is early engagement with the township and a long suite of technical reports and studies that need to be completed. So those have been completed. Some have been updates from the previous submission, and that formed our application package. Next slide, please. So this is zooming out a little bit, and just for context, as this site is connecting on multiple sides to the Midhurst Heights development, we wanted to show how those developments line up. So we can see here that Street A connects and carries through is the collector road going north-south through the Midhurst Heights and connects even to the development lands to the north of them. We can also see, and we've worked with the Midhurst Heights group on some changes both on this plan and as well as their plan around the north part of the plan to improve some of the road pattern around that kind of long narrow piece, which we refer to internally as the chimney on the site. We can also see here the area that's identified in the bottom left corner, other lands owned by applicants. So that is the piece that was removed from the previous plan. Next slide, please. So this is showing the lands in the context of the township's official plan and more specifically the Midhurst secondary plan. So the lands, as you can see here, are located on the east side of the Midhurst secondary plan, which is the Doran neighborhood. Next slide. So this is zooming in, and some of these maps are a bit conceptual, as we can see with these circular overlays, but there is the brown represents high density residential and mixed use. So that's where we've located that mixed use block. It then transitions into a medium density residential and then into lower density residential in yellow. Next slide, please. This shows the current zoning. So currently in the township zoning bylaw, the entire site is zoned agriculture or A. And that just reflects that even though these lands were designated historically through the Midhurst secondary plan, no development application to change the existing zoning has proceeded right through the approval process to date. Next slide. So the proposed zoning bylaw amendment that's before the township is to rezone from that existing agriculture zone to different zones based on the layout of the plan. The bulk of the plan would be proposed to be zoned to a new urban residential 4 zone. And that would provide zoning standards for the different ground-oriented unit types proposed, the singles, the townhouses, and those back-to-back townhouses. We are then proposing to zone that mixed-use block to conveniently the township as a zone called mixed use. And that permits a variety of mixed-use types of development that could be implemented in that block in the future. And then the two park blocks are zoned open space, which is the standard practice within the municipality. Next slide, please. And here's the proposed zoning schedule. So again, on the stripe patch, the majority of the site is that urban residential 4 zone. Then we see the crosshatch is where the 2 parks are. And then the kind of polka dot right along Doran is that mixed use zone corresponding with the mixed use block. Next slide, please. So for the new urban residential 4 zone, as set up, we've taken the township's urban residential 3 and built on that to permit the different product types that are proposed in the proposed draft plan. And specifically, the township zoning bylaw, while the official plan did contemplate back-to-back townhouse dwellings, there wasn't any zoning standards in place for that product type. So we've implemented that within this new zone and borrowed from zoning standards that we've seen in some other municipalities. Next slide, please. So this is the table of the different, it's difficult to read on one slide, but along the top is the different forms of development the zone would permit: singles, semis, the different forms of townhouses. And where we've identified as red is it's a new zone provision over and above the township's UR3 zone. The column highlighted in red, that is the back-to-back townhouse dwellings. So the entire thing is red because that did not exist in the zoning previously. The red around the single detached dwellings, the one difference there, typically the township asks for a 1.2 meter interior side yard setback on both sides of the house. And what we're seeing in other municipalities and other developments is a 1.2 on one side and a 0.6 on the other. And they're staggered so that you have a combined separation of 1.8 in between the dwellings. Next slide, please. So one of the required reports we submitted was an urban design guideline, an architectural control document. So some of these images are excerpts from that, and they just show some of the example product type that's being considered. So this is what's envisioned for the single detached dwellings. And specifically we can see a single car garage model here on the right-hand side, as well as a two-car garage model on the left-hand side. Just seeing the site plan there, those are for 10.7 meter lot, and then the corner lot's a bit wider. And we have included some zone provisions as well to allow for things like porches and stairs to encroach a bit into those setbacks. Next slide, please. Here's the townhouse concepts. It is a 6 meter wide townhouse product that is being proposed. So that would be a single car garage and driveway format of townhouse. Those driveways would be twinned, and we do that to ensure there's space on the street between the banks of driveways for some on-street parking. Next slide, please. And here we see the proposed back-to-back townhouses. And as mentioned, these are a newer form of ground-oriented dwelling unit we're starting to see. It's one of these forms of product type that is sometimes referred to as the missing middle, but it's one of these product types where people can get into home ownership at a lower price point. They are essentially traditional townhouses, but they're essentially pushed back to back, so there is no rear yard. They're pushed right up against, and therefore they come with a cheaper price point. They use up less land, and they are a higher density form of development. The back-to-back townhouses would be a 3-story product as well. And because of that, on the plan, we've located them in the central part of the plan. So they are buffered from anything surrounding the development, as there's banks of other types of housing from the outside roads into where the back-to-backs are located. Next slide, please. These are two different concepts that could be possible in that mixed use block in the future. That would need to come forward through a future site plan approval process. That would be done at a later stage once the draft plan approval is approved and things are moving forward. It is required to have mixed use there, so there would be a commercial component as well as a residential component required. The concept on the top would be a more traditional kind of condominium apartment style building. 3 stories, we see commercial on the ground floor, and there would be apartment style units above. And then the lower concept is a live work townhouse concept. So they're individual townhouse 3-story units that people would purchase. But the way they're set up is the ground floor is for a kind of a home-based business or professional office. And then the upper 2 units would be where would be a traditional dwelling unit. So if you have your own accounting business, you could have your office on the ground floor, and you and your family could live above. And again, that's a product type we're starting to see in different municipalities. And the proposed zoning would allow for either of these. That would be determined in the future. Next slide, please. So at the time we prepared this presentation to get on the agenda, we had received some comments were starting to trickle in from different agencies. There is an updated list that was provided with the agenda today, as we have received some additional comments. We got some comments from the NVCA, and I know we received a few written comments from some residents leading up to today's public meeting. Next slide, please. So as part of the proposed development, we did have to prepare a planning justification report where we go through the various levels of provincial, county, and township planning policies, and showed how the proposed development conforms with all of those. Next slide, please. So the conclusion of our report is we do believe the proposed development represents good planning and does conform or is consistent with those various levels of provincial, county, and township planning documents. Next slide, please. So as far as next steps, we'll receive comments from members of the public and council this evening. We'll then take those back. We're still awaiting some of the technical comments from different departments and agencies. Once we have all of those, we'll sit down with our client and our project team, go through them, see if there's any revisions that need to be made to the plan, any additional reports or studies or updates to those that may need to be completed, and that will ultimately form a fulsome resubmission into the township. And then we'll continue to work with township staff to work through any remaining comments before a recommendation report would be brought back to council at some point in the future for a decision. Next slide. And that concludes my presentation, and we'll be taking notes from any comments we hear from members of the public, and then happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chisholm. At this time, I will call upon the moderator to let us know how many people have registered to ask a question or make comment regarding this application.
Yes, Mayor Coughlin, we currently have 4 members of the public who have registered to make an oral submission. We're going to begin with Sonia Gable of 107 Doran Road, who is virtual. Just one moment.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name's Sonia Gable. I live at 107 Doran Road. So I think I have more questions than I do. Well, actually I have concerns as well as questions. But for what I see right now with the constraint that Midhurst Heights has on this specific intersection at Gill and Dorn, which is extremely dangerous intersection at this point. I guess what I'm worried about is the road that the roadways specifically, whether they widen or safety wise, sidewalks, etc. The next constraint I have is schooling. To have this many homes with this many people, we don't have enough schools in Simcoe County or specifically Midhurst to accommodate this many people. So I guess my question would be, what are we doing with schooling? I realize there is a school going in Horseshoe Valley. But this puts a considerable amount of strain on the public school, specifically Forest Hill. I guess I'll leave it there. I do have some more. I just don't know if I'll pause for questions if anyone can answer those.
Thank you, Ms. Gable. Typically we take the comments, but I can turn to our planning department to see to speak to the institutional areas within the Midhurst secondary plan that have been proposed for new schools.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mayor Coughlin, to the resident and to the rest of council. I'll address the first comment regarding the road first. We have also made a similar comment as part of our preliminary application or info report that's on tonight's meeting. We've also had preliminary discussions with the applicant about the top of the hill there and sight lines, and ensuring that where we do make that connection between the north portion of Doran Road and the south portion and the planned subdivisions that are draft plan approved there, making sure that that road is in a safe and secure location. There is willingness on both sides from the developers to work together to ensure that roadway is properly addressed, and there are sight lines. The other portion here is Doran Road is planned to be a urbanized cross section. So there will be proper safety and sidewalks and proper measures there. On the second point related to the schools in Midhurst, there are 2 school sites that are currently draft plan approved within the existing subdivisions. We have one on the west side as part of the D Hickling subdivision, as well as on this east side of Midhurst, as part of the Midhurst Heights subdivision, there is a school block established. One is for the Catholic School Board and one is for the Public School Board. So there are 2 new school sites coming online that are already draft approved, and we are working with the school boards on an ongoing basis to establish those. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I guess my last comment is just, yes, the specific safety of Doran Road with as much as it is a hill. My main concern is, yes, the amount of housing going in and the safety of residents that live along Doran Road, as well as Russell Road. And with that, I'll leave it with all the council right now. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you for participating. I will now turn back to our moderator for our second resident, please.
Yes, Mayor Coughlin, we have Megan Basil of 3759 Baseline Road, who has registered virtually. However, I'm unable to see if they are on our stream at this moment. Next, we have Mr. Ron Palmer of the Planning Partnership. I'm unaware if he has registered to be in person or virtual. However, I cannot determine if he is on our stream. So, Mr. Palmer, if you are in the council chambers, can you please go to the front? And next we have Rafat Malik of 10 Park Trail, who has registered to be in person.
Not seeing anyone in person, but moderator Madhu, if you could check, you have a guest with the name Phil.
Yes.
Continues to, I don't know if they've registered or if they're looking to speak to this.
Yes, I'm allowing Phil to speak. Just one moment.
Thank you for that.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Sorry, the chat was disabled, so I was feverishly raising and lowering my hand. I'm sure someone, yeah, thank you. I guess my question is about...
Before you do begin, can I just have your full name and address, please?
Oh, sure. My name is Philip Bazell, and my address, I'm actually Megan's husband. You called her name earlier. It's 3759 Baseline Road. And I'm curious, what is I guess this might be a question for the developer. What is the timeline for the beginning, sort of groundbreaking? When do they expect units to be coming online, available for move-in? He may have gone over that, but I missed it. I was half listening at points.
Thank you. And I can either turn to, if you don't mind, Mr. Chisholm. I will say, though, that often the development community and the township have differing timelines, so we can maybe allude to what or how long a subdivision like this might typically take to when we see it as it is today and when we see shovels going in the ground. But I will turn to Mr. Chisholm first.
Thank you for the question. Through the mayor, it's a difficult one to answer. As everyone knows, there's a lot of different factors that go into it. Where we're at right now, I think the earliest you could see home construction starting on this site would be in 2026. But it certainly could be later than that. There's some external infrastructure, that's going on or ongoing in Midhurst, as well as market conditions also dictate that as well. So it's not set in stone, but from my experience and where we're at in the process, I think that's likely the earliest we could see it.
Thank you for that. And I will turn to Manager Russell for further comment on that.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to the rest of the council. This development is predicated on the ultimate sewage treatment plant coming online. The earliest plan we are looking at currently is probably 2027 for commissioning of that plant. So to your earlier point, there's give and take here, but we're looking somewhere beyond 2027 for coming online here. Thank you.
Thank you. Was that a straight answer? 26, 27? We'll go with 27 and beyond.
That's a good ballpark. Sorry, I have one other question about, it seems to me that the developments are relatively large and in the proximity of well owners. So I'm just curious, I'm sure there's standard due diligence for ensuring that the protection of sort of the local groundwater aquifer and just in terms of fouling wells in the area. Is there any additional due diligence required there on the part of council?
Thank you for that question. And I can turn again to Manager Russell to speak to the Class EA or Director Heron for the Class EA for the secondary plan.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's Director Heron here for Mr. Basil's sake. There is a standard that has to be met to protect the existing water supply for surrounding properties that are on wells. And the developer would be servicing it from a single drilled well, I suspect. And they do have to perform testing to make sure that there's no unwarranted or unwanted drawdown on other surrounding users.
Thank you for that. And I think that's what we see on the property adjacent to it right now, that giant red thing that's up in the air there, that's the well going in. So this time I do have Manager Russell for additional comment.
Just to follow on Mayor Coughlin, I'd also note that much of Midhurst is on municipal water currently. So there's very few wells left in Midhurst or properties on well, and mostly to the north and west along Gill.
Thank you for that. And Phil, I don't see your hand jumping up and down anymore. Is there anything further before I?
No, I guess just the comment that it would be great to see a food market in one of those commercial spaces. And other than that, thank you for your time tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for participating. And I don't see any other, I will not turn to moderator Mordu to see if anybody else came back online, but I'm not seeing anyone from this end.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I am also unable to determine if there's anyone else for this application who would wish to make comment.
Thank you for that. I can now turn to members of the audience this evening if there's anyone that wishes to make comment or have question regarding this application. And not seeing any from the audience, we will turn to members of council. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. Just a few comments. I realize this proposal's in its infancy, as they all start out with, but a few comments. One, I noticed that this seems to be much higher density in terms of the product being offered compared to, say, the development to the north. So that is somewhat concerning. So maybe that's something that can be talked about in the future. And one of the main reasons that is concerning is that all of that additional traffic makes its way down to Doran Road, which is already, we're already noticing increased traffic, particularly on the weekends, but it's of some real concern. Then when I look at Street A that you've straightened out in your plan, you know, that funnels the 1,500 and some odd homes down to Doran through your proposal. So it's not just everyone who lives there in that densely packed area, it's everyone above it as well. So I think that puts tremendous strain on Doran Road. And for the people who live there presently in the school, you know, that's of concern to me. I also noticed that Street A exits onto what I think, because of the grade of the land, I think that's on a hill. So maybe that was, I think you mentioned there was a bit of concern from the township, but so that could be a safety concern anyway. But one thing I will say is I think this stresses the importance, and I've talked about it before as of staff members, the importance of Craig Road's completion. You know, the Midhurst secondary plan is moving ahead. It's, you know, that ship has sailed, but the importance of infrastructure around these things, regardless of how dense it is or isn't by the time we put shovels in the ground, I think that the public and staff and all of council need to be highly aware that Craig Road's completion is a vital piece of infrastructure, right? If we're going to be putting these amounts of homes over there. So anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Turn to other members of council for question or comment on this application. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Mr. Chisholm. I heard you mention something about on-street parking. Is that something that you're contemplating when you do your design? Is the assumption that people will be using on-street parking? What I'm finding in the higher density communities, much like what you're proposing, is parking problems, winter for snow plowing particularly, and then more than one vehicle per family in these very small sort of single garage type homes. So are you proposing then visitor parking? Because what I'd really like to see is some allocated visitor parking. We're not seeing that in the subdivisions that are currently underway, and we are having some struggles with that. So assuming that what you meant by that was you are proposing some sales on street parking, I'd like that to be incorporated.
Mr. Chisholm?
Thank you. And through the mayor to Councillor Moore, that's an excellent question. Just to tackle the first part of it with the townhouses, I mentioned the driveways are twinned. You'll sometimes see blocks of townhouses where the driveways aren't twinned, they're staggered. And what we find is when on the narrower townhouses, if you stagger the driveways, there's not actually enough width in between them for even one car to park on the street. They start to hang over, especially the larger vehicles. So even though I think from a end user perspective, you might prefer to have a driveway that's staggered and not connected to your neighbors. But what we're seeing now is requirements to twin driveways on townhouses so that there's the option that there's one vehicle can park in between those banks. From a zoning perspective, we actually can't rely on the on-street parking as to meet the zoning. So for the townhouses, the requirement is 2 parking spaces per unit. So one is within the garage and one is in the driveway. And certainly municipal roads, people will park on the street. I would imagine in Springwater that there's no overnight street parking through the winter months. I know it's that way in Barrie. But yeah, we can't rely on the on-street parking, but we try to do the layouts so that there's that opportunity for people during the day or even overnight through the summer months. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there. And the visitor parking comment, I can certainly take that back. It's not something I've seen on these public road subdivisions to have like a dedicated visitor parking area. On condominium roads, sometimes we're seeing that, but certainly a comment we can take back.
Councillor Fisher?
And also just a comment, I noticed some of them are, I guess I'd call it a low rise. I think it was 30 units in a building, but that presents some concern to me, and I know it would for a lot of my residents as well. I think that other developers have made an effort to have fully detached homes, sort of a different type of community. I know that in Toronto and even in Barrie, they've done that, but that presents, and again, I know it's in its infancy, but that does present a bit of concern. And I think that members of the community wouldn't like to see that either.
Anything further, council? All right. Thank you all who participated in the public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and for showing interest in the matter. We will now move on to ZB 2024-014, and this is 2842 Wilson Drive. I will now call upon the clerk to confirm the notice of this meeting and which dates notice was given.
Notice of this public meeting was mailed on the 22nd day of August, 2024 to the owner of the subject lands and to the assessed owners of 4 properties in the township of Springwater within 240 meters of the area to which the proposed amendment would apply, and to all persons and public bodies as prescribed under the Planning Act and its regulations. Notice was posted at the assessed property to which the proposed amendment applies at a location visible from Wilson Road. Notice was also posted on the township's website.
Has the planning department received any correspondence?
Correspondence was received from the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority in an email dated September 10, 24, from the City of Barrie Risk Management in a memo dated September 11, 24, and the correspondence can be found attached to this evening's agenda.
Thank you. I will now call upon the agent to outline the proposed, the purpose and the effect of the subdivision application and zoning bylaw amendment.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Better yet, can you see me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for having me. Good evening. My name is Jonathan Pock. I'm a senior planner and registered professional planner at Morgan Planning and Development here on behalf of our client Legacy Golf Properties Incorporated. here before you this evening in regards to zoning bylaw amendment 2024-014. Next slide, please. The location of the subject property is shown on the screen. The municipal address is 2842 Wilson Drive, and it's located at the northwest corner of Wilson Drive and Seaton Road. Next slide, please. As mentioned, subject property is at the northwest corner of Seaton Road and Wilson Drive within the Snow Valley settlement area. Subject property currently has a lot frontage of 570 meters onto Wilson Drive and 700 meters onto Seaton Road. Lot area is 43.2 hectares in area. It's currently developed with a single detached dwelling fronting onto Wilson Drive, and the rear of the portion of the property is largely comprised of agricultural cropland and a small woodland towards the rear of the property. Next slide, please. The image on the screen is just an aerial image showing the current development of the property. As you can see, as I alluded to, the cropland, the wooded area at the rear of the property, and the single detached dwelling fronting onto Wilson Drive. Next slide, please. The image on the screen here is a excerpt of the provisionally approved consent application that was approved in January 25th, 2024 by the Township's Committee of Adjustment. The purpose of the application was to sever the existing single detached dwelling from the balance of the property, being the agricultural and forested lands. And the purpose of the application this evening for the zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone the orange severed lot to prohibit any agricultural uses and to recognize the rural residential use, as well as rezone the yellow lot or the larger retain lot to a site-specific zone to prohibit any residential development. So effectively preserving the larger agricultural land and ensuring that remains an agricultural production for the long term. Next slide, please. Kind of went through this slide already. You can go to the next slide. This is just an excerpt of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment schedule. As mentioned, you can see the grade severed lot would go to a site-specific zone, as well as the larger retained lot showed in the cross hatching to a site-specific zone to, again, prohibit the residential use of the property. Next slide, please. Two images on the screen. The one on the left is an excerpt of the current zoning bylaw, in which the property is zoned agriculture. And on the right-hand side is an excerpt from the township's official plan showing that the property is designated agricultural and also within the Snow Valley settlement area. Next slide, please. Included in our application was a full planning analysis addressing all the applicable planning policies, including the PPS, Place to Grow, Township OP, and Township Zoning Bylaw. Next slide, please. Based on the conclusions in our planning report, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is consistent with the policy framework included in the PPS, County OP, Township OP, and is in general direction with the Township zoning bylaw. And as I mentioned, the implementing zoning bylaw will ensure the long-term production of and protection of agricultural lands, as well as recognizing the current rural residential use of the severed lot as well. And effectively, this application will help to ensure satisfying the conditions that were set out in the Township's Committee of Adjustment decision back in January of this year. That concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. At this time, I will turn to our moderator to. Oh, do we have anyone registered for comment on this one?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Coughlin. There are no members of the public who have registered for this application.
Thank you for that. And are there any members of the public this evening that wish to make comment or have a question regarding this application? I'm not seeing any. I will turn to members of council. I'm not seeing anything on this. We will now move on. Thank you to all who participated in the public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and for showing an interest on this matter. We will now move on to ZB 2024-015, which is 1822 Sunnydale Road. And I will now call upon the clerk to confirm the notice of the meeting and dates on which notice has been given.
Notice of this public meeting was mailed on the 22nd day of August 2024 to the owner of the subject lands and to the assessed owners of 13 properties in the township of Springwater within 240 meters of the area to which the proposed amendment would apply, and to all persons and public bodies as prescribed under the Planning Act and its regulations. Notice was posted at the assessed property to which the proposed amendment applies at a location visible from Sunnydale Road. Notice was also posted on the township's website.
Has the planning department received any correspondence?
Correspondence was received from the City of Barrie Risk Management in a memo dated September 9, 24, and from the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority in an email dated September 10, 24, and both pieces of correspondence can be found attached to this evening's agenda.
Thank you. I will now call upon Planner Hawk to outline the purpose and effect of the zoning bylaw amendment.
Good evening, Council and members of the public. My name is Ariane Hawk. I'm the planner helping the Harrises with their presentation tonight for application ZB 24015. Next slide, please. So just some background information on this property. The address is 1822 Sunnydale Road and consists of approximately 24.83 hectares. They have about 723 meters of frontage on Sunnydale and 380 meters on Grenfell Road. The property currently contains a single detached dwelling with attached garage, an oversized detached building, which is a large barn on the property, and 2 steel grain bins. Next slide, please. So in March 2024, this year, we approved an application, we approved a consent application for this, which was to sever the lands outlined in blue there, which would sever off the house as it was surplus to the farm need on the lands. This severance proposed to sever 0.57 hectares and to retain approximately 24.26 hectares. Next slide, please. As part of this consent application, there was 8 conditions that were laid out. Conditions 5 and 6 of this decision was to rezone the retained lands and the severed lands. So that would retain the severed lands to A54 and rezone the retained lands to an AC consolidation exception. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to read fully that, but essentially the policies at the provincial level, at the county level, and at the township level allow for this kind of severance as long as the local planning authority essentially prohibits all of the residential use on the retained lands to be prohibited. So this is actually what we're doing here tonight. We're just essentially ensuring that the retained lands are zoned to an AC and that the severed lands are to an A54. Next slide. Myself and the applicant are available should you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I will now call on the moderator to provide the number of people who have registered to ask questions or make comments regarding this application.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Coughlin. There have been no members of the public who have registered to make an oral submission.
Thank you. Now turn to members here with us this evening. If anybody has any comments or questions regarding this application. Not seeing any. I'll turn to members of council. Not seeing any. Thank you all who participated in the public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and for showing an interest in this matter. And I think before we do move on to our final, this evening, we'll just take a quick 5-minute break if that's okay. Thank you. And at this time, we will begin to resume, and we will be dealing with application OP 2024-005 and ZB 2024-016, our short-term rental accommodations. I will now call upon the clerk to confirm notice of the meeting and the dates on which the notice was given.
Notice of this public meeting was published in the Springwater News on the 15th day of August 2024 and circulated electronically or mailed to all persons and public bodies as prescribed under the Planning Act and its regulations. Notice was also posted on the township's website.
Has the planning department received any correspondence?
Correspondence was received from Gord Knox of 653 Lakelands Avenue in Innisfil in an email dated August 28, 24. From the County of Simcoe Planning Department in an email dated September 3rd, 24, and from Nora Dixon of 7 Cedar Lane in a letter dated September 10, 24. All correspondence can be found attached to this evening's agenda.
Thank you. I'll now call upon Planner Lisk to outline the purpose and effect of the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendments.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Coughlin, members of council, township staff, and members of the public. Tonight is the statutory public meeting required under the Planning Act for the consideration of a municipal-wide official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for short-term rentals in the township. Next slide, please. As a brief overview, township planning staff met with township's legal counsel earlier this year while reviewing the draft licensing bylaw. Through these discussions, it was determined an update to the township's land use planning documents were warranted to ensure a consistent approach with the draft licensing program, which is a separate item currently under review by council. In short, currently the township's land use planning documents do not define short-term rentals and do not list it as a permitted use within residential zones. As the township considers regulating these uses going forward, it was necessary to update the township's land use planning documents. Following the direction from the township solicitor in spring of this year and direction received from council in July, staff have drafted the necessary amendments to the township's official plan and zoning bylaw, which is the subject of tonight's public meeting. These are draft documents. They are subject to discussion at tonight's public meeting, and no staff recommendation has been provided at this time. Next slide, please. So the township has initiated an amendment to the official plan to provide guiding policies for the consideration of short-term rentals that would be implemented through the township zoning bylaw and also administered through the short-term rental licensing program. Next slide, please. The draft zoning bylaw amendment proposes to provide a definition of a short-term rental accommodation and permit such accommodations as a secondary use within all zones that permit a residential dwelling unit, a seasonal dwelling unit, and an additional residential unit. The draft bylaw amendment proposes a minimum parking requirement and limit short-term rental accommodations to no more than 28 consecutive calendar days. Next slide, please. As stated, the zoning bylaw amendment as drafted would permit short-term rental accommodations in all residential zones within the township as listed here on this slide. Oh, sorry, that's just the next slide. Next slide, please. So all of the residential zones in the township have been included as it would be a permitted use. Sorry, can you just go back to the previous slide? Thank you. The definition includes that a short-term rental accommodation must be secondary to the established main residential use. This inclusion in the definition ensures that short-term rentals are not the primary use on a lot, as such use would be more aligned with the definition of a commercial accommodation. This means that a dwelling unit cannot be rented out on a short-term basis more than it is used as a primary dwelling. Therefore, the long-term residential component of the property is still maintained. The terminology secondary was added into the definition based on the township solicitor's advice that the township provide a clear distinction in the proposed definition of when the use becomes a commercial accommodation. Further, staff have recognized that additional residential units, which are already secondary in nature and accessory to a main residential use, would not be applicable to this secondary component. Therefore, if you do have a basement apartment, it could be rented out on a short-term basis entirely. Next slide, please. Sorry, after this one, next slide too. One other component that the zoning bylaw proposes is a minimum parking requirement, and that's 1 space per bedroom that is rented. Next slide, please. This concludes the formal presentation part of tonight's public meeting. As noted at the beginning of this presentation, no recommendation has been provided at this stage, as we are here tonight to gather input from the public and council. Following tonight's public meeting, planning staff will review all comments with possible revisions to the drafted policies and provide a recommendation to council at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now call upon the moderator to provide the number of people who have registered to ask questions or make comments regarding this application.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Coughlin. There are 7 members of the public who have registered to make an oral submission for this application. We'll start with Mr. Gord Knox, who I'm unaware if they are in attendance this evening.
Mr. Knox, if you're with I think we can move on to our next person.
We have Brenda Gogan, who is in person.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us. And our next registered?
Yeah, we have Miss Karen Martin, who is registered to be in person this evening.
Fantastic. And if at any point during this, if you do have a question that comes to mind, if you would rather just email it to us at a later date, or if you at that time would like to come forward, please do. We can move on now to our first virtual attendant.
Yes, we have Miss Anne Fang, who I'm just going to unmute. And please state your address for the record.
Hi, my name is Anne Fan from 3 Cedar Lane, Elmville. Can you hear me?
We can, Miss Fan, thank you.
Okay, thanks. I have some comments and also some questions. I believe that the short-term rental, it does provide local jobs. It provides customers to local businesses, including attractions, the stores, the restaurants. We also have a lot of cleaners that come there often to maintain the properties, as well as the trades to do maintenance and upkeep on the properties. My understanding is, I am not sure this is the right information or not. I didn't see in your documentation, but I heard it somewhere else that you're looking at 3 days minimum. Having a 3-day minimum booking, it will deter anybody who's looking for weekend trips to the area, including like weekend ski trips, or it's just for 2 days is what they can afford to rent, instead of taking extra time off of their 9 to 5 Monday to Friday jobs to have a vacation in that area. Also, I saw somewhere that the response time, they're looking at like a 30-minute response time. And I feel that's a little too soon, given that if someone's on the road, they're driving, if they can't take the call right away, action. So I time. If there's an emergency, I guess people would be calling the fire or 911. And I have a question about the just gonna say now. I forgot what was my question. Sorry.
Ms. Van, at this time I can ask Planner List to address the 2 questions that you did have first. We're just looking for clarification on stipulation of minimum stay and I will turn, to Clerk Ainsworth for minimum stay and 30-minute response time.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Those 2 pieces would be in the regulatory bylaw. The response time within the bylaw is stipulated as 1 hour and not 30 minutes. So it does provide a bit of additional time. And that is a requirement for either the owner or a responsible person who has been established by the owner to be able to respond to the property on request of the township. As far as the minimum night stay, yes, the bylaw does propose a minimum 3-night stay. That is something that was requested from council last year for staff to include within the draft bylaw. And again, it would be up to council to determine if that requirement would be changed.
And Ms. Van, did you have anything further at this time?
Yeah, I remember the third question. In terms of secondary use, I mean, if we use that cottage as our primary cottage, like as our family cottage, and we do short-term rental on the number of days that we don't use as a primary cottage for the family, would that be considered as a qualified secondary use?
I will turn to Planner Lisk for this.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. To the member of the public, yes, correct. As long as the use as a short-term rental would be less than the time that's used as a primary residence.
Ms. Van, is there anything additional?
When you say primary resident, you mean do we actually have to live there, or we can use it as a family cottage?
And I think just for clarification, as many cottage owners, the cottage is the secondary property. So I think the question is, if they have a primary home and the cottage is their secondary home, what is the use permitted in their secondary home or their cottage?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And that's a very good question. I would say as long as there's a long-term component to that other residential use, then it would be fine. So your seasonal cottage use as a primary long-term residential use on the property, and then the secondary use being your short-term accommodation would be an appropriate use. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Ms. Van, is there anything further before we move on to our next?
That's it for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. And I will now turn back to our moderator for our next. Yes.
Yes, we have Mr. Peter Finn, who has separately registered. I'm unable to determine if he is on our Zoom feed this evening. Mr. Finn, are you in person?
I don't see Mr. Finn.
Next, we have James Merrimack, who is online this evening. I'm just going to unmute him. James, can you hear us this evening?
I can see his hand. You're still muted.
Hi, can you hear me now?
We can, yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, my headset microphone failed to work. Yes, hi, good evening. My name is James Memrick, and I'm owner of 5620 Penetanguishene Road, Melville. Councilors, Mayor, sorry. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with respect to the short-term rental accommodation. I have a few items I would like to speak to this evening. Because, well, for one, short-term rentals are a boon to the local economy. They do bring people in who do visit other areas. They provide things as Ms. Fan had said about hiring cleaners and other trades within the area to keep the upkeep of the property a little more often than some others may do with their own properties as well. And the other item that it allows is that people who otherwise couldn't afford a cottage within the area have been able to have cottages to enjoy things like Orr Lake and other things up there that they otherwise couldn't afford if they didn't have income coming in from those properties as well. And they also, by not being vacant, help to reduce crimes of opportunity because of people seeing places that are unused, which means that you have further cases of people just breaking in or squatting onto properties and then the problems they can bring into the neighborhoods like that. I do have some concerns with a few of the items that have been brought forth and other rules, which is the first one being the minimum parking requirement of one space per bedroom for short-term accommodation. I agree that all parking should be contained on site to the rental and would like to see that more as the definition. By defining it as one space per bedroom is a little overzealous, as many families and friends arrive in a single vehicle and enjoy a space together. And with our vehicles like the SUVs and minivans, provide 5 to 8 people in a single vehicle with using roof bins or trailer hitch characters for their personal items. You know, they fill up more than one room in a single vehicle. So, you know, if they can't work with that self-contained definition, then something more along the lines of one parking space per 2 bedrooms would be more reasonable, as it would encapsulate like a 4-member family of parents having 1 bedroom and at least 1 room for their kids. Though at times with older children, especially different genders, they tend to be wanting to have their own rooms. So that's just what I bring forward as a consideration on that parking piece. With respect for the duration, the short-term rental, which is what I saw in the Barrie Today article that posted a bunch of the items that I didn't see in any of the documentation that was on the site. Stating a 3-day minimum stay as well, I agree, is a bit restrictive, as many families, even cottage owners, only travel up on a Friday and they stay on the Saturday, returning on the Sunday, which is a 2-night stay. So that's kind of more of a normal stay, whether you're short-term rental or if you're just a regular owner of a property, of a cottage going up. Whereas the 3 is a little bit too restrictive, and I can understand I'm for not having the 1-day rentals, because that's what's going to push out those people who are just looking to rent it for a day for a party or something like that. Well, pushing it to 2-night, they're having to spend that additional money, meaning that they're, you know, generally you're getting more of a family or something else there as opposed to an overnight party. And also in that direct contact, which, as was clarified earlier about it being a 1 hour, is that what does that direct contact mean? That they respond back by phone within that hour of being contacted, or is that like being on property within that hour? It's a little vague. And as was mentioned, it may not be safe for someone to, it's hard to respond within that time if someone's driving to get to a safe location, take the call. And will the phone calls come from phones that are not marked as private? Since this is supposed to be coming from municipality contact, would not expect that to be a private call, and have had that happen other times in the past with other areas where you're getting that call, you don't know who it's from, and therefore well, they've said they've left a voicemail, there wasn't a voicemail, it was as a private call, so you didn't even know who to call back, because you didn't even know you were being called for something of a bylaw or something by any municipality. So, you know, having how that goes is kind of important. And then if they're doing fines or anything with that, well, how does that person, the private citizen, get that information back, saying, to show that, you know, yes, from their call log, they called your number at this time, it was this duration, in order to show that, yes, that did happen, because strange things happen with cell phones and everything else. It's that things don't go through. And I've never seen public resources respond within 30 minutes or even an hour in most cases to complaint, yet this is being put on something as a private citizen. So I've got that as just a comment on that. And yeah, that's pretty much where I leave that, because it's, you know, yeah, the municipality is there to provide the services, and you know, items of between neighbors is not really what the municipality is for. Hopefully owners are doing what's right to communicate with their neighbors and do things. But hey, I've had where I've had to move because I had a neighbor decide to put a fence down the driveway on the property line that had never been there for the 60 years that it had been built. And even though for the municipality that I was in, city that was in, that's fences are their thing. They say, well, no, that's a civil suit. So it's you have regulations and so forth, but you're not trying to you're not there for trying to mediate between neighbors.
Thank you, Mr. Mimrick. I did see our planning department write down your two comments about parking for 2 bedrooms and your concern with the minimum night stay. I will now turn to Clerk Ainsworth to address the receiving of the call, whether it's in person or a phone call.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. The draft regulatory bylaw states that the owner of a short-term rental premises or a responsible person shall be available to attend the premises at all times within 1 hour. So it is being able to attend the property itself within 1 hour of being contacted.
Okay. And from being contacted, what defines that? Is that you've left a voicemail and then expecting someone to be there, or that someone has answered the call? Because that 1 hour timer, what is triggering it?
Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you, through the mayor. It states by way of telephone or email. It doesn't specify from the time a call is answered or whether it's a voicemail left. This would be used in a time of urgency when there is a grave issue that has been provided to the township. There wouldn't be an expectation of attendance by a responsible person for a minor issue, a small noise complaint, maybe a parking complaint. It would be something that would be a major, most likely safety issue.
Well, that would be great to have that specified, please, within that bylaw item, so that people are aware of exactly what constitutes that they have to have someone there within that hour.
Thank you very much for the comment, Mr. Mimrick. Is there anything additional before I move on to our next submission?
No, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for joining us. I will now go to our moderator to move on to our last representative tonight.
Yes, that's correct. Mayor Coughlin, we have Miss Nora Dixon, who is in person this evening. Nora, if you could come to the stand and please state your address for the record.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Dixon.
Hello. Good evening. This is somewhat humorous because I'm here. I live at 7 Cedar Lane, which is directly beside 3 Cedar Lane, and Anne, who just called in. So I guess you're seeing things from her perspective, things from our perspective. But I will say that, and I have included in my notes right at the beginning, we have had excellent relations with them. With the owners of the place. Any concerns we've raised have been dealt with very timely and effectively, and we really have no complaints against them or the unit as a whole. But I did think that perhaps, would it be appropriate to ask if any of you live beside a short-term rental? It's okay. So I thought I'd share a few stories that have been dealt with effectively, but when you're making the regulatory part of the bylaw, you might want to consider these things. So first off, I did confer with the neighbor on the other side of the fence as well. And he would have been here today with me, but he has had other commitments that he had to attend to. So first of all, I'd also like to say that my husband was involved with municipal government for a few years, and his 2 big burning issues always seem to be dogs and taxes. So be prepared. The first one is fireworks. Over the years, we've witnessed various things happening with renters letting off fireworks. There was a group who would light them on the shore, then walk to the end of the dock to set them down. That's a personal safety thing. There were young girls lighting fireworks in the driveway, which was very close to several sheds, bunkies, houses, propane tanks, etc. And that was another one. There was another time when renters were letting fireworks off on the top deck of the short-term rental. And I believe there was another time, and I can't remember what it was right now. But we would like to recommend that you put something into the bylaw that prohibits the use of fireworks by short-term renters. I do believe that Anne at one point had that in her rules, and the problem seemed to dissipate. But it is a safety concern for those of us who live close by. I don't know if that happens in other locations other than lakefront property, but it may. It seems that people come up and think, oh, we're in the country, we can do what we want. Let's let off some fireworks at 10 o'clock at night. And I think it is a safety concern. The second one is fire. At one point, Anne had rented the accommodation to a young couple for about a month. The husband worked in Toronto. The wife was taking courses somewhere near Toronto. And she left one day by Uber and left a pot of corn boiling on the stove. She realized what she had done, but for some reason she called Anne instead of turning around. Well, Anne is in Toronto. So she called me. Luckily, I was home, went over, turned off the stove, opened the windows, let all that sort of thing happen. So I do think they do have smoke detectors as they are required. I would think that it might be judicious to ask that sprinkler systems be installed in any place where there's a cooking appliance or a furnace or something like that, so that I shudder to think what would have happened if I had not been home that day and been able to go in. Our house is very close. There's 4 propane tanks between the two of us. You get the picture. That's a consideration anyway. The next point is that you back to this 1 hour, not an hour. It feeds from the previous comment about the fire. I would like to see them owners have to have somebody within very close proximity that they can call in an emergency. The 1 hour does not hold it. Anne would not have been able to get up to the house to turn off the stove in time before a fire had broken out, I would think. So that was that one. And now for the dogs issue. On more than one occasion, I had been accosted by renters' dogs running across to our property when I came out. Our neighbor has had a pit bull renter's dog on his dock, which prevented him from getting to his boat. He also had a dog that had been tied to a tree, which had somehow climbed over the fence, but was dangling by his neck on the other side. So I think it's not enough to say that dogs need to be under control of their owner or that they need to be tied up, but I think that they should either be on a leash at all times or the owners provide a containment area of some kind so that they can't get out and about. And there are portable ones that could be put up when the owners arrive or when the renters arrived and taken away when they weren't needed. This is something too. I find some of the renters are not sensitive to the ecosystem of the lake. You know, there are things that we live there permanently respect, and people who are just there for a short time are maybe not aware of them. Some things like feeding the ducks, which we all know is a no-no. They come around the docks thereafter and they become pests really, but it's not healthy for them either. We've seen them dump things in the lake. We've heard of reports of some of them bathing in the lake. We know that Orr Lake is in a rather delicate state right now. We've had algae blooms 2 years in a row. We have zebra mussels that have been imported somehow. There's been giant hogweed on the south side. I just find that they're not totally tuned into what they should be doing. I don't know what the owners can do about that. But I put that forward as something for you to think about. I would wonder if you could limit the number of short-term rentals on an environmentally delicate area, such as Orr Lake. Cap the number so that we aren't overrun. I'm not sure how many renters or short-term rentals there are right now, but I know on the North Shore, at least there are 5 or 6, and along Penetang Road, there are more, and I'm sure there's a lot more over on the south side. I don't know if you would consider doing that, but it might be something to pursue with the Severn Sound or NVCA. So all those points have been based on our observations over the years. There's a few other things that I would like to mention. If you've had a chance to read Mr. Knox's submission, that he should be in your package, I think. He says that STRs really are businesses and they aim to make a profit. I can understand why they're taxed at a residential rate because they are zoned residential. But they're making a profit. We next to them are not. We're paying the same tax rate. So I am wondering if there would be a possibility of a tax break or some kind of compensation to those of us who are directly beside them who have things to watch, if you get my drift. And I know there is a housing shortage, and it would seem that all these short-term rentals are taking places out of the possible rental pool. And I wonder, I know at one point, Anne and I have talked about them finding someone to rent over the winter. There are lots of people who live in mobile homes or whatever in the summers who have to find places to rent in the winter. Her concern is that once they get in, they would fall under the Landlord-Tenant Act and she might never get them out. I think she's had experience with that or knows of people who have. So I'm wondering if there could be something put in that you could extend it over winter months or something for a longer stay without it coming under Landlord-Tenant Act. I don't know if that's even a possibility, but it's a thought that you might consider, which would help with housing. And I know Anne said that there's a lot of income generated. Frankly, I don't see that happening from what we've observed. People tend to arrive, back their car up, open the back up, take in their coolers, their beer cases, their pop cases, and a lot of them don't leave for the weekend. And I think that's in part because they provide so many recreational activities for them. They don't need to leave because they can stay there and have a whale of a time. So I do question whether or not these short-term rentals in a recreational area really do contribute to the local economy. And I guess with that, that's about all I have to say. I do think there's a social impact too on those of us who live next to or near to a short-term rental. We never know who's coming. We never know, should we lock the doors? Will they have a dog? Will the dog bark? Do they look decent? Will they have fun? Are they going to be nasty? We've lost privacy because with a waterfront property, you have no privacy across the front at the waterfront, if you get my drift. We have fences between us, but the waterfront is open, so you lose a certain bit of privacy as well. And I think it can tend to erode a neighborhood, a feeling of community, a sense of privacy, and that sort of thing. So I think that's something that should be considered. I don't know what you would do with it, but I just throw it out for you to think about. And I must say that we really have had positive experiences with these few exceptions. We have even had one group of renters ask if they were making too much noise. I don't think that happens very often. So I'll leave you with those thoughts. If you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them for you. I just thought it would be helpful to hear the perspective of someone who lives a short-term rental life. Okay.
Thank you very much for that, and definitely for sharing your perspective of that. And I will.
And thank you for listening.
Well, thank you. And at this time, are there any other members of the public who wish to speak to this application? I'm not seeing any. I can turn to members of council. Councillor Fisher and then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Just a comment. I've had the opportunity, I've had a few members of the public reach out to me in a few different wards actually, who do operate short-term rentals. And I think there's a bit of a distinction between something you might see on Orr Lake, as mentioned, and something you might find, as I found out, actually about 5 doors down from me. There's one operating and has been for years, unbeknownst to me. So obviously they're doing a good job with it, right? But one concern that I noticed repeatedly, and I can say I was one of the ones who actually wanted the minimum stays of 3 and 4 nights. But one concern that repeatedly came up was that, a lot of people come into the area, particularly I think in the south, right? And, they might be working for Georgian College and might be there for 2 nights, or a family member might be at the hospital and they're just staying there for a quick night. And as one person said, it was a retired couple actually, and they said that's sort of their bread and butter, right? It's not the week-long stays or the 1 month stays, it's actually 1 or 2 nights. And so I think that's one thing that we should take a look at. I previously, I can say when we embarked on this, I wanted to have minimum stays because in my mind, I don't operate one. I thought that was probably the way to go, but I think we should revisit that because there are many people who do operate it successfully, but they are 1 and 2 night stays, so, and as one person said to me, if it went to a 3-night stay, they probably wouldn't rent it at all. Right. So they would lose that revenue. Right. And again, I think if somebody's renting on Orr Lake, they're renting for 3 nights, a weekend, maybe a week. But it's a little bit different in more of a suburban setting, I guess I'd say. So.
Councillor Thompson.
Just a comment, Mayor Coughlin, and I don't know whether if Chief Kirk is on or not. It just relates to the fires. And when I purchased my fire permit, it's specific to me. And I just wonder how that would work with a short-term rental. Would they need to purchase a fire permit of their own, which I think would be reasonable if they're going to have a fire, because they would have to sign off on all the regulations, or would that fire permit fall under the owner of the short-term rental?
I did see our planning staff taking note of the question. Thank you. Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And I've actually had numerous people reach out to me on this issue, many from Orr Lake, many who I think are in the gallery tonight. So I will chat with you after as well. This is actually probably the most correspondence I've had on any matter that we've had at this table, which is great. I love to see the public engaged. And I think there's been some really good comments, and whether they're comments, concerns from both sides. I feel like everyone I've spoken to has been very respectful in where they sit and just kind of all want to come to that best regulatory rules and bylaws that we can have to ensure we have the success of the short-term rental program, because it's not something that's going to go away, but also by being very mindful of the people that live by them, that own properties, that whole piece. There's both sides to see here. I would say I would agree with Councillor Fisher on the 3-night stay. I think I definitely push that as well. And as I listen to the discussion, I can see maybe why you would move to a 2-night stay. And then I just thought personally, I know from hockey tournaments, I know a lot of families do short-term rentals as opposed to hotel. Like there's different things I think maybe we didn't think of, and that's why it is so important to engage with the public. 1 space per bedroom, absolutely. My kids would not, I don't want my kids staying in the same bedroom as me, but they would travel in the same car as me. So there's a lot of interesting things. So yeah, I just want to thank the public for all of their questions and concerns, and please continue to reach out. I think this is an important issue for Springwater, and I'm glad we're addressing it.
Thank you for that. Come on up. I actually just need your name and we just for the public record. Sorry, I do need you to come forward. My apologies. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm Lindy Bates and we live at 2413A Wedham Road, but we have 2413A and B Wedham Road or apartment. So the night stay. So as a person who's used short-term rentals while traveling or whatever, like sometimes we're traveling and we'll stay at a place one night to carry on to the next location. So again, just back to that 1, 2, 3, 4-night stays. We are looking at possibly making our second dwelling as a short-term rental. That's why we contacted Councillor Alexandra, and being like on the same property, we feel that we'll be able to monitor more so of what's happening, because I do hear lots, and I do know within Lake there are lots of short-term rentals where the owner does not live close by. And we do hear, things going on in some of the other short-term rentals in our area. But I think overall, I like the comment of making sure that there is someone close by that is responsible if the owner can't be. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Garwood.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And just to stem off of what Councillor Fisher and Councillor Alexandra noted in regards to the 3-night stay and whatnot, I almost see this as varying by location within the municipality, right? We always talk about we are a collection of unique communities, right? We are coming up on our 30th anniversary of an amalgamation of different municipalities and communities. So what concerns might come forward from Lake residents could be very different than that suburban feel that Councillor Moore and Councillor Fisher might feel in their communities that they represent. So I can almost see how stemming off of what the individual from the audience had noted around being close. If it is your residential property and it's a secondary unit and it's your basement, it's whatever it may be, you're there, you're in the area. It's a bit different than if it becomes a turnover rate consistently in a residential subdivision. I've always taken the stance when it comes to this of supporting our full-time residents and understanding that there's that balance. Something that was brought forward earlier on that I would really like to dive into, and I know Councillor Alexander has championed the environmental aspect as well from the SSEA perspective. I think that is so important. Again, understanding that Lake doesn't follow my ward, but it's right there, and understanding that it is a close community to the Annabelle community as well. So I think the environmental aspect is also an important piece to focus on.
Thank you. And I do see, is it Ms. Van? Is there an additional comment or question that you have before I do move on? What I'm gonna, I guess we have some technical difficulties here. The additional comments and questions, I do see some hands coming up again. As everyone has had one opportunity to speak, what I will ask is that if you can provide your additional comments, if you can email them in, whether it's to all of council, to clerks or planning department, so that they can form part of the public record. Thank you. Councilor, are there any further comments or questions on this? I guess for myself, I choose support moving to a 2-night minimum. I think that the 3 is very cumbersome, and I think that the 2 to me is almost a compromise. I know myself, I travel a lot as a team, and we rent larger places. And it's interesting when you go onto Airbnb, and if you get it for 3 nights, it's this price, but it's the same. If basically their municipality must have a 3-night minimum. You book it, but it's the same cost as staying for 1 night. So you book it for 3 nights, you show up for 1. So we don't want to try and create a bylaw that encourages people to work around us. We want to have a bylaw that encourages people to work with us. So I think that hearing the comments tonight, I would agree that the 1 parking spot per bedroom would be very prohibitive to those, but ensuring that it's self-contained. But I would like to thank everyone for being out here with us this evening and for your questions and comments. And like I said, if you do have anything additional, please do send it along. So thank you all to those who participated in the public meeting with respect to the proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, and for showing an interest in this matter. And at this time, I would ask council for a mover and seconder to adjourn the public meeting, please. I have councillors Thompson and Moore that the public meeting held under section 3(4) of the Planning Act for SU 2024-002 and OP 2024-004 and ZB 2024-013 of 139 Queen Street West and SU 2020-002 and ZB 2020-017 of 132 Doran Road and ZB 2024 and 014 of 2842 Wilson Drive and ZB 2024 015 of 1822 Sunnydale Road and OP 2024-05 and ZB 2024-016 short-term rental accommodations does now adjourn at 8:50 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. At this point, we're just going to go through a whole bunch of reading and hands up and down, but there won't be any more discussion or information. So please do feel free to get on your way home if you would like. And if not, feel free to stick with us. We've got probably another 10-15 minutes here or 5. Well, we'll see. Sometimes there's comments on things. So at this time, we will have our direction following the public meeting. And the first is 4.1. which is SU 2024-002 and OP 2024-004 and ZB 2024-013. And this is 139 Queen Street West. And our recommendation here is to have it referred back to staff. So may I have a mover and seconder for this, please? I have councillors Thompson and Alexander. The council, having held a public meeting in accordance with section 172134 and 51 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 CP 13 as amended for draft plan of subdivision of SU 2024-002 official plan amendment and OP 2024-004 and zoning bylaw amendment ZB 2024-013 by Loft Planning Incorporated on behalf of San Diego Homes Incorporated, having noted correspondence and input received, direct that the application be referred back to staff. Council, is there any comments or questions on this? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that has carried. We will now move on to 4.2, which is the 132 Doran Road. I need a mover and seconder for this, please. I'll have Councillor Fisher and Councillor Garwood. That council, having held a public meeting in accordance with sections 34 and 51 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 CP 13 as amended for draft plan subdivision SU 2020-002 and zoning bylaw amendment ZB 2020-017 by MHBC Planning on behalf of Silver Paradise Midhurst Incorporated, having noted correspondence and input received, direct that the application be referred back to staff. Councilor, are there any additional comments or questions at this time? Not seeing all those in favor, and that has carried. We will now move on to 2842 Wilson Drive, and that I'd mover and seconder, please. I'll have local councillor Thompson and Fisher. That the report from the junior planner regarding ZB 2024 and 014 dated September 11th be received, and that subject to comments received at the planning meeting, the bylaw be submitted to council for consideration and approval on September 11th, 2024. Anything further on this one? Not seeing any. All those in favor? That has carried, and we move on to 1822 Sunnydale Road. And a mover and seconder for this, please. Councilors Alexander and Fisher, that the report from the junior planner regarding ZB 2024-015 dated September 11th, 2024 be received, and that subject to comments received in the public meeting, that the bylaw be submitted to council for consideration and approval on September 11th, 2024. Anything additional on this? Council, all those in favor? That has carried. And on to our short-term rental and accommodations. I'll have that mover and seconder, please. Councilors Moore and Fisher, that council having held a public meeting in accordance with sections 17, 21, and 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, and CP 13, as amended for official plan amendment OP 2024-005 and zoning bylaw amendment ZB 2024-016, having noted correspondence and input received, direct that the application be referred back to staff. Anything further, council? All those. Clerk Ainsworth?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Just to clarify for council as well, at the September 4th meeting, the regulatory short-term rental accommodations bylaw was deferred to the September 18th meeting. Now that regulatory bylaw does deal with some of the items that council had discussed, specifically the minimum night stay. So should council wish to change that, an amendment would be required at the September 18th meeting when the regulatory bylaw is tabled for consideration. Anything else such as the minimum parking, the definition for the secondary use, that would be dealt with through the zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment, which is not at the next meeting, but however will come in the future. So just keep in mind that those are the two streams of this process. Anything regulatory would need to be amended next meeting. Anything that was included in tonight's public meeting as part of Planner Lisk's presentation would be done when the OPA and ZBA come forward at a future date.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Council, all those in favor? And that has carried. We will now move on to our bylaws 5.1. A mover and seconder, please. I have Councillor Garwood and Councillor Fisher that the bylaws listed herein be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. 5000-395 ZB 2024-014 of 2842 Wilson Drive, 5000-396 of 1822 Sunnydale Road, 2024-071 OPA 2023-002 of 25 Yonge Street North. Anything further on these? All those in favor? That has carried. In our confirmation bylaw, mover and seconder, please. Councillors Thompson and Alexander, that bylaw 2024-072 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the special meeting held on September 11th, 2024, listed here and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? That has carried. And finally, our adjournment, a mover and seconder, please. Councillors Garwood and Moore, that the special meeting of the Township of Springwater does now adjourn at 8:56 p.m. to meet again in regular meeting on September 18th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. And thank you very much to our planning staff. That was a fantastic meeting.